Thank you for tuning in to Dynamic Art LLC. I'm your host, Daniel Butler, and today we're going to paint people of color. Stay tuned. One of the reasons why I was compelled to do this is because over the years of me doing artwork, I would rarely see people do examples of people of color. Not to say that those examples aren't out there, but they're not as easy to find as you might think they would be. And a lot of times, you know, when you're looking to paint a different demographic, you'd like to have some kind of a blueprint. So today's episode is basically dedicated to doing this, and we're going to do other episodes because there are a variety of ranges of people of color, not just the range that we're going to show today. And the purpose in this is just basically to broaden your horizons and to give you another perspective of how to do certain things when it comes to painting portraits of color or doing illustration work with people of color. And you'll have kind of a blueprint to understand exactly what you need to look for and a method to basically pursue. So let's get started. Hey, and thank you for hanging in there. So like I normally do, I like to show you what the finished product looks like before we get into how everything was created, so that you can kind of have a map and a blueprint of pretty much what we're going to do. So as you can see, this is what our finished piece is going to look like. And so let's just get into how we created this. So one of the things that a lot of times when you are trying to do a portrait or a picture of somebody, you need to start with a color palette. And the easiest way to get this color palette that you're going to actually create is to go ahead and select your colors from your reference. And so what I typically do is, we'll zoom in here, is I will go from light to dark. So I will find the lightest part of the skin tone, should be about right here. And then I will find the darkest parts of the skin tone, which would be about right here. And between these two, I would select my color palette, going through selecting each one. And what will happen is you'll end up with a nice variety of colors from your picture that you can actually use to create your actual illustration. And so, zoom up here. These are the different colors that I selected from the picture, from lip color to highlights to skin tones, and also hair. And so we're going to use this particular palette to create our skin tones and our details for our picture. Once our color palette is selected, we can go ahead and go into the construction part of our particular piece. And the way that we go about that is I use a construction brush that I actually bought off of Jazza's website because I like the way that it feels when I'm actually drawing. And I'm going to show you my errors and also my fixes. So there, you know, I've been doing portraits for years, and there is no real easy way to do it. You work them to the right, and hopefully you come out with a brilliant piece. So with that said, these first particular construction lines are not correct, but I'm going to walk you through it because it's better that you see how you correct these things versus me just showing you a finished product and saying, yeah, that's how it was done. So we're going to start with our construction lines before edit. And as you can see, it is somewhat looking like it's on right. One of the issues I've had with the sizing of my faces is I've been doing a lot of different tutorials on how to construct the face. And I've kind of gotten away from how I would normally do things to try to figure out new ways to do things. And what has happened is I've started making my faces a little wider than they should be, when I start with the circular part of doing the actual beginning parts of our head. And I needed to look at this a couple different ways. One of the things I had to do is I had to adjust the jaw. Things were too elongated when I was trying to get everything, laid out proportionately right. I ended up making her face a little too long. And so what I initially did was erase and fix that. And as you can see, it didn't move up much, but it moved up enough to where things started to look comfortable. Then I also realized that there was going to be a problem with this eye. It's too far over to what would be the left side of her face. And I didn't correct this right away because I was so frustrated in the beginning that I went ahead and went into the inking, which is something that most people would tell you never to do. But I went ahead and did it. And this is the initial inking. I did make the adjustment slightly with the eye and moved it over as I tried to draw over my actual lines. But then I realized that this wasn't going to be still correct, and so I had to do another adjustment. And what I did was, and I will turn off our construction lines because we no longer need to see that in the way. But I do want to show you what I did to deal with the issue of her not being all the way over. So what I did was I decided that the best thing to do was to move her entire face over, and I just basically went and lassoed around the areas that I felt like needed to be moved. And I did it just like this. Once I had that area basically selected, I went up into our move tool and click on it. Of course, you need to make sure that you're on the correct layer when you do it. So I clicked on it, and this will basically select an area to move. And I made my adjustment by doing this. I moved her in just a little bit here, and then I went back and actually, we can deselect. I went back in and actually started to redraw all the different parts that were misaligned. And that was just a little bit of a trick that I learned basically to shortcut when you realize certain things are off. I mean, you can also use different tools. With this, because it was already inked, I went ahead and used that method. And we'll step it back here and deselect. So once I did my edit, and we can turn that one off, and we can go to our original hard lines here. This is the original hardline piece that I came up with. From there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a base. And what the base allows me to do is it allows me to select this areas that are inside and not color outside of it. And once that part is done, and the way I create this base is I basically take our magic wand tool, and we'll go back up to our hard lines, and I select everything around it. Then I come up and I hit inverse, and what that does is it gives me this area. Now you're probably wondering, well, how did you get the rest of this? Well, what I went ahead and did was I held shift after I went and grabbed the lasso tool that we can draw around with, and I just basically created the rest of what I needed like that. That way we would have a completely solid area that we could paint in and have a solid base to paint inside of. And this also helps so that you can see if there are any areas that you need to fill in. Once all of that was done, I went ahead and moved into my flat colors. And my flat colors are going to be picked from, I'll usually pick a color that's usually in the middle of where all my shades are going to be. And so we start with our flat colors. And you can start to see how things take shape. This is definitely by no means the great finale piece that we want it to look like, but it's giving me a base to start working from. And by putting in solid colors underneath our hard lines, it gives me the ability to still see where my details and shapes need to start going in. And so once I have my flats in, I can go ahead and start doing my under shading, which is going to be underneath the lines. And once we do that, we start to see how this face is coming together. Now this is just using a regular brush. I'm not using anything special. These are just regular round brushes. I use soft when I'm blending, and I'll have my pressure on for my actual tablet. And what this allows me to do is also get variations in the actual shades and tones, and I can start to blend those dark colors and those light colors in. Once we get done with our initial shading underneath our lines, we can start to look at creating some of our other details, and that would be our top shading. And as you can see, once we put in our top shading, our lines totally disappear. The best way to do this is to go in, and when you decide to go above those solid lines that you have, you're going to select the shades around those lines, and I just slowly start to blend those in. And as you can see, we blend them out and things become a lot more structured and easier to see. And that's all done with going over top of your lines. And this is just a regular soft brush. Then we're going to do a couple of our details and add our highlights in. And then from there, we still have all this area in here, and that gray base that we put in does work for us as far as doing, the highlights in the hair, because of course they're not going to be white. They're going to be shades of black and gray. But I wanted to add a little bit more of an interest to it. One of the things that I tell people is that I like to keep a artistic look to any of my artwork, and the main reason for that is if we wanted to have a photo, we could just take a photo. By creating the actual artwork, we give a style and an element to it, and so I try not to take those particular things away. Next, we go ahead and we add in our hair details, and I felt like this was a good way to keep that cell type look of illustration mixed with a little bit of paint, and that's pretty much how we went about on creating this particular face. Now, I hope that this was a little bit more informative. I will do live drawings in the future so that you can see the process and all the way through, but they are pretty long, and so I try to save you the boring hours that I spend shading or redrawing or cutting up and fixing whatever I messed up in my initial drawing. So let's move on to our next piece, because this was just our face piece. We also had a body piece, and we're going to go a little bit faster through it because obviously we have already seen this particular process. There were some extra elements that we added in. One of the things about this particular rapper / singer rapper, actor, however you want to put it, is that she has a peacock on the side of her thigh going all the way up past her hip and everything. And so I thought that this would be like a really cool element to add as far as the feathers and the colors. And then also, I didn't like the color of the dress that she had for our overall piece. I didn't feel like it was going to fit the theme as well. So I went in and we custom changed a lot of these things, and we did it basically around the fact that she has a peacock tattoo. And this allows us to have that element of originality, because you have to keep in mind, we're looking at pictures that people have already taken. And so we have to take these particular pieces and we have to make it brand new and make it our own, so that it becomes our own original artwork. And the best way to do that is to basically figure out what you can add as far as elements to create a unique piece. And what we're gonna do first is we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna go into our initial construction lines. So my initial sketch here, one of the things that if you are noticing is that her head is way too big. And it is something that I had to struggle with. Like I said, drawing these new methods have kind of thrown my proportions off. And so I spent a lot of time correcting it. And once I went into the correction, this time I did it before the inking. And the correction, as you can see, that head got a lot smaller and it fits the body a lot better. And with that being said, I felt like we were able to go into how we were going to make this dress. Now, I wanted to make sure that after we did our initial outline of how this dress is going to be, is that it still kind of resembled what she had, but I wanted it to have the element and colors of the actual peacock and tattoo. And so let's go ahead and go into our hard lines first. And as you can see, once we get our element of hard lines in there, we are able to move forward and start laying down our flat colors. Let's go ahead and turn off our construction lines, and we can move into adding our base, because we want to make sure that we have an area we can select without going outside of it. And I've already showed you previously how we did that, where we created this whole area so that you could go ahead and just color inside of it. And from there, I started with the dress, and we're going to add in our solids for the dress first. And this is pretty much a flat color base that I dropped in to figure out the tones, and I selected all these colors from the images that we are basically taking the picture from. So up here you can see that these are all our skin colors again, and they mimic exactly what we had in the last one. And then these are the colors that we're going to use as far as the peacocks and the feathers and the extra elements that we want to add into it. And so this particular green was going to be our base. From there, I went ahead and added in our black hard lines, because I wanted to change this up altogether. I felt like this would help everything stand out, the color range that we wanted and everything else. And so from there, we went into our actual shading for our dress. And I tried to follow the same thing that we had going in here with the different reflections, but only in the colors that we were going to use for our actual dress to give it that unique feel. And I feel like we did a pretty good job as far as how the shadowing for the reflection of the actual dress that she has on, how it hits everything. And I feel like it also had a very good, unique look as far as being able to relate it to the peacock feathers. And so this is what our dress looked like. From there, I went ahead and did our flats for our skin. And as you can see, everything starts to come to life. From there, we're going to do our undershadowing. Okay, and then we're going to go through the same method and we're going to blend out our lines again. So our top shading, bam. And once we do that, as you can see, it has elements of how you would do cell shading. And if you zoom in, I mean, you can kind of see, like I said, this is kind of my style, where we have really deep highlights and shadows that basically jump up off the the actual character itself, so that you see those, even though it's smooth, you see a nice hard shape or hard blend of highlight into the actual skin to give it that more detailed look and cell type look. But like I said, I do take my lines out of it for the most part, because that's just my particular style. From there, we wanted to add in a little bit more of her details. So, we'll throw the bling in her shoe. And then we also had the element of her tattoos. This can sometimes be a little bit challenging when you're looking at tattoos that are in a picture and you can't really make them out. A lot of times I'll try to Google what that person's tattoos are so I can get as close to them as I can. The best advice that I can tell you is make it look like what you can see in the picture and put a blur on it. And that way it can be kind of out of focus but correct, and you can still see everything that goes, that makes the tattoo look like what it looks like, and people can pretty much figure it out from there. That would be my advice on that particular way of doing things. Let's see here, anything else on this particular piece? The only other thing that I would probably say as far as how this piece went is that when doing the hair, sometimes it's better to leave more of a dramatic feel to it. Even though her hair doesn't have like this many highlights in it, I felt that it became necessary because she was going to be against herself as a background, and a lot of that hair would get blended out if it didn't have a highlight element to it. And so from there, we can go ahead and go into our creating the actual poster piece. Now I do these in 18 by 24s because that's what I run off on my machinery. And we'll start with our background here. I wanted a goldish type marble look. And so I had to play with a bunch of different brushes to get that effect. But roughly, this is what I came up with. And it's kind of like a paint blotch over everything with a couple filters or blend modes over top of it. And I felt like that gave it a creative background that would be good to move forward and do our pieces over top. And so we'll bring in our main attraction, which is her full face, and then from there we'll go ahead and bring in our second picture. And as you can see, the highlights were needed, but it did blend in more than we wanted. And so what I did was I created a light behind her, and that kind of gave it a little bit more of a stand away. That way you can see the two pieces, but they can also fit together. I added a ground shadow so she's just not floating in space. And then I decided that, we're dealing with a lot of space over here. Now, a lot of times when I do these pieces, I'll add in things like different awards and different things that the actors, singers, athletes, may have to basically show their track record. This is a particularly new star, and so I just decided to base things off of what I would feel her personality would be. And we know that she already has a peacock on the side of her, so I thought the element of having the peacock feathers would actually be a cool route to go. And so from there, we just go ahead and we add in the creative part of adding our peacock feathers. And we'll sign our piece and we will move on from there. This is our finished piece, and we'll go into printing it and seeing what the end result looks like. I hope that this has given you some ideas on how to not only select your color bases for it, but how to go about painting and doing different things for your actual face that will be of a person of color. So stay tuned and we will check out our next part of this. Well, here as you can see, we have our finished product. This is a printout of our actual illustration for this poster. And this is done on a photo-based paper, which is a little bit heavier and a little bit more glossier. But I like the actual way that the image came out. Everything looks pretty good and clear. I hope that you've enjoyed this particular episode, and stay tuned because we'll do a lot more things just like this. You have a good day. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Thank you. Please subscribe so that we can blow up this channel. Have a good day.